Welcome back. Welcome back, Toronto. We trust you had a great networking opportunity. And I notice many of you are over visiting Caroline Ellis. Carolyn is with Brilliance Mastery, and she's a visual facilitator. She joins us at almost all of our events, so we're thrilled to have her here again today. She not only does facilitation, she actually does leadership training as well. She works with organizations on their strategic directions, on their visual consultation with her clients. She really helps them create that strategic plan. She improves their team performance or captures the essential points of her key thoughts and their events in her doodlings, literally. So take a look and check out the work that she's doing there on the side of the room. How are you doing on your key insights? Have you got at least one key insight from each of our speakers today? There are more insights that are coming for us this afternoon as well. But what we find is that the thought leaders are incredible, and people often, they'll want to find out, well, how do I do this in real life? How do I really make this happen within my organization? And that's where we get incredible value and benefit from our executive panel. So here to talk with us today and share their insights into how they've accomplished what they've gotten to so far today is Marc, the Vice President of Support and Development Services for Dell EMC, Holger Kormann, who is the President of ADP Canada, and Caroline Riseboro, who is the President and CEO of Plan International. Please welcome them to our stage. Welcome, Marc. Holger in the center, Caroline around the end there. It's a little bit of a Cirque du Soleil to get into these directors' chairs. We'll see how you make out with that. Getting in isn't the hard part, it's the exit that is. So have that to look forward to as we go. And we're so glad and thrilled that you could join us here today. And so welcome to the Art of Leadership. And can you just tell us a little bit about, maybe Caroline, we can start with you at the end, a little bit about yourself and what brought you to our stage here today, please.
Sure. So my name is Caroline Riseboro. I'm the President and CEO of Plan International Canada. And for those of you who may not be familiar with Plan, we're one of the largest international NGOs in the world, mainly focus on children's rights and equality for girls, both here in Canada and globally. And we're well known for our Because I'm a Girl campaign. And what brought me here today, I think the excellent panelists that I'm going to have some great conversation with. And I think because at the end of the day, I truly believe, you know, as Plan is working on something like solving poverty, inequality, at the end of the day, to truly have breakthroughs in our humanity, we need to talk about the art of leadership.
Thank you. Holger, what about your experiences?
Yeah, my name is Holger Kormann. I'm the president of ADP Canada. We are involved in workplace technology, and now I know some of you like, you guys are the payroll guys, right? That's true. But we do much more than payroll. We do really productivity solutions, cloud solutions, software, and outsourcing solutions for all types of work and certainly corporate places. And in that, certainly leadership is a key relevant topic. And I'm here to share some of the thoughts we have as ADP on the evolution of work. So looking forward to that.
And Marc?
Right, so Marc Mondesir, thank you very much for having me and the rest of the panelists here this afternoon. It's exhilarating to be looking out at this audience today. So I work for Dell Technologies. Dell is, of course, a technology company that helps organizations sort of drive their digital transformation. Transformations don't happen in a vacuum. It takes people, it takes leaders, strong leaders, to help folks sort of drive that, you know, those transformation and drive that change throughout their organizations. And given the fact that there are parallels between the two, I thought it was apropos to be here today. Beautiful. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. So my hope is that I will guide them through a conversation where you really feel like you're sitting down, eavesdropping in on three executives, talking about the stuff that they would be talking about all the time. And so my opening question for all of you, and maybe Caroline, we can start with you again. Reid Hoffman, co-founder of LinkedIn, has a great quote saying, "No matter how brilliant your mind or strategy, if you're playing a solo game, you'll always lose out to a team." You come together at the Art of Leadership to have a conversation around strengthening leadership capabilities and ultimately building better teams and organizations. So what does your company do, what does your organization do to build the bond amongst your leadership team?
You know, this is so apropos because when I took over Plan International, we had, I think, what was a fairly sort of archaic leadership style. It was very much driven from the top. You kind of took directions. And I remember sitting down with a vice president that reported into me in my early days, and she asked me, "So what do you want me to do this week?" And I said, "What?" And she said, that's how it works. You tell us what to do, we go do it. And I thought, you know what, that is not how great organizations function. And if we are truly going to tackle issues of gender inequality around the globe, we've got to function differently. So, you know, I talk to people, and I remember even in my early days at Plan saying, okay, you know, this, yes, I am the CEO, I'm the leader of this organization, but we're going to lose together, and we're going to win together, and we're going to do this together. And as much as I was actually sharing that story about the fact that really great teams achieve results together, I think words are really easy. It's really easy to say that, but it doesn't necessarily change behavior. So one of the things that I did as CEO and that I would encourage you to think about is, how do you actually systematize winning as a team together? So one of the things we did really early on was we actually created goals, the goals that the entire organization had to get behind. We had 4 of them. They were measurable, and that was really what we did, or how we determined success. And so I would say, of course, we all know that we win together, we lose alone, but how do you actually systematize that within your organization to reward people? That's actually the key.
Wow, thank you. Marc, what about for you?
Well, look, you know, when I think about that, you know, first place that my brain goes is to the typical tactics that organizations use to drive kind of teamwork and inclusion. The management offsites, the team building events, that sort of thing. But as a leader, personally, I tend to focus a little bit more on the subtleties, on frankly the little things. Every work anniversary gets recognized for every single employee, and we tend to make a bit of a splash about it. Every single birthday is recognized, and if you think about it, you know, we spend, I want to loosely say, 2/3 of our time at work, right? We spend the majority of our time with the people, with our peers. We spend more time with those folks than we do with our friends, with our family, with our kids. So, you know, the goal is to make the time that we spend at work valuable, meaningful, create an emotional connection with folks at work, taking a genuine interest in people. So I suppose the third tactic that I would offer you is, every year at the beginning of every fiscal year, every one of our leaders, every one of our employees presents what we like to call a dream board, where they share with us what their goals are for the year, whether it be material goals or personal development goals. It's done with, you know, PowerPoint, there are images that we can all identify to, and all of that stuff kind of helps to drive a culture of inclusion and of genuine interest.
Wow. So even though it's Dell, you're actually working with human beings.
Promise.
There we go.
True story.
Holger, what about ADP? How do you bring the leadership team together?
Yeah, I believe that fun is a key part of leadership. There's a uniqueness about humor and fun, and which connects people and bonds them in a very, very special way. And while you can align targets and send them to an offsite to do some crafts together or do some escape room, I think when you schedule fun, you make room for it, it's part of the agenda, that creates teams and connects teams in a very unique way. So I encourage everybody, and certainly at ADP, we start presentation off with a cartoon and with a story and an anecdote, and it melts the ice, and it really gives our team a humanness to it, which is very, very hard when you just talk scorecards and benchmarks and numbers, and payroll is not always exciting. I know you guys are thinking differently, but that is something which is very important to us, to have also a good line of sight to bring some humanness to it, and fun is a good part of it.
Now, Holger, I hear a little bit of an accent there. And so with your background, though, and talking about fun, how does that come together? Where are you from, Holger?
Well, for those of you which don't know or can't figure it out, it's a German accent, and I know, it's Germans and fun is not always something which goes hand in hand. But, you know, eventually I think I got around to that, but yeah, no, Germans can laugh.
Brilliant, thanks you
Thanks
so much,
for that.
Holger. Yes. Caroline, I'm starting again with you if we could. So if you could give one piece of advice to leaders on how to innovate and really stay ahead of the curve, what would that be?
So quick question for the audience. Who here has been in their workplace and has been told to innovate more? Right? So, it is this thing that we keep talking about over and over and over again. And, people are saying, well, we've got to innovate to, get ahead of the curve. And what I'd say to folks is that if you're already starting to talk about the fact that you have to innovate, you may have lost the battle a little bit. And bear with me for a second, because I'll explain myself. I mean, the only way to really manage change is actually to be the change yourself. You can only manage change by actually causing the change. So if you're talking about innovating, you're kind of already a little bit behind, I would say, the 8-ball on this. What I try and do within Plan is ultimately ground ourselves back in the mission. And I realize it's a little bit easier for us because, we're sort of working on the side of the angels here in terms of trying to combat inequality around the globe. But I keep asking myself and my team, what are we going to do differently or better, or how are we going to even change ourselves to better deliver on our mission? So I think at the end of the day, innovation in itself is not an end. Ultimately, what we have to ask ourselves is how can we better deliver on our organization's mission? And if that is really your focus, innovation will naturally happen. I think if we just keep talking about innovation like it's one other thing to add to the list, we've actually lost the point. So the question is not, what are you doing to be innovative? How are you innovating within your organization? I think the question is, how are you changing for the better to best deliver on your mission to your clients, to your customers, to your stakeholders?
Wow. So that makes me think of a question for you then, Holger. And how do you stay connected with the marketplace so that you can anticipate its needs?
Yeah, there's two things. One thing I think is incredibly important to do is first scan the market for disruption, right? Because you can innovate yourself as long as you want to. If you build always a better bread box and somebody is having an entirely new way on how to keep bread fresh, the bread box won't do it. So it is really, you got to keep the eye on, is there disruption coming from any angle? And it could be in a different industry, it could be software replacing, and there's the famous Uber story and the taxis, and so keep an eye on that, right? And once you're clear on that, my recommendation is talk to your team, which talks to the clients every day. The clients know it all. They know what they want. And it is really the number one source for innovation. The clients will tell you what they want, and by talking to the frontline associates, it could be in sales and our service reps and certainly our implementers, they know it. They know exactly what doesn't work, what clients want, and you need to structurally take that data, and that's really the fuel of staying current with what the buyers want. That only works, again, if there is no disruption coming from any angle.
And so your leadership team then, whether it be innovation, whether it be staying ahead of the curve of listening to your customers, Marc, at Dell, how do you quantify the outcomes of quality leadership?
Yeah, I remember seeing this question. I thought it was an interesting one because, again, my brain wants to first gravitate to some of the typical things that you hear across industries, right? So employee surveys, and I mean, at Dell, we tend to take our employee surveys quite seriously as well. I don't want to diminish the importance of those surveys, right? Particularly around the Net Promoter Score, right? So this notion of whether or not an employee would be, or a team member would be willing to recommend your place as a great place to work. So all that stuff is great. But again, I tend to focus on the subtleties. I tend to focus on the little things. And, you know, your team's culture is a direct reflection of your leadership, right? And the effectiveness of your leadership. Within our services group, we've got a culture code that we tend to use as a framework for most of the audit of this culture that I'm talking about. So we talk about being accountable, we talked about being engaged, and we talk about being knowledgeable. And quite frankly, if we're hitting the mark around those three tenets, right? If we've got evidence that employees are engaged, that they're holding themselves accountable, and you can see them in the most subtle of situations, right? The way that they answer an email. If you see that there's a genuine thirst for information, for knowledge around the knowledgeable piece, if those three tenets are sort of upholding themselves, then that's likely an indication that the leader is doing a good job.
And so everything I'm hearing, listening to our customers, paying attention to those Net Promoter Scores, innovation, as organizations get larger and larger, though, the tendency is that the institution will actually dampen inspiration. And so, Caroline, just because you gave us that piece around innovation, maybe I want to start with you again here. How do we keep that from happening? How do we stop the institution from dampening inspiration?
I mean, it's a great question, because I think sometimes as organizations grow, which tends to come from folks that are passionate and entrepreneurial, then we start to put in things like processes and policies, because you get to a certain size, you have to operate like a larger enterprise. And we went through this at Plan. We are actually bucking the trend right now, even though philanthropy in Canada is declining. We are still growing as an organization and attracting new supporters. And so one of the things that I've really tried to instill with my team, and maybe I'll ask you in the audience this, but what have you done this past year that you thought might just get you fired? Ooh. Who's done something this year that you were kind of on the edge? I don't see a lot of hands. There's like two. Oh, one.
Their bosses are in the room with them.
Okay, 4 or 5. All right, we got 5 out of what? 1,000 people here. But I asked that question, to be provocative, but also because if we are not pushing ourselves to go to that edge of sort of almost, where the fear sets in, where the uncertainty sets in, we are not actually going to be creating the kind of change that we need to change to keep our organizations right on the cusp. So it's actually something that I ask every employee to think about before they start going into putting together their goals for the year. Put one thing on there that is a little bit crazy, and it's okay if you fail. And in fact, we measure some of these things. We actually look for employees that are pushing the boundaries and trying new things. And you know what? Failure isn't a failure if you learn from it. So again, kind of putting that into the system, so it's systematized, so that people feel like there's safety. And I think that's so important. We talk a lot about innovation and staying ahead of the curve and trying new things, but then we don't actually give our staff the safety to fail. So those two things go hand in hand.
Marc, Holger, thoughts about that? How do you get the institution to not dampen inspiration?
Yeah, the institution, I think the negative connotation is always it's speed, it's staleness, bureaucracy, and if you have any indications of those things, you're already in trouble. I do believe a ratio of how many of your associates and employees really talk to clients and how many are really talking to each other in administrative function. You've got to keep an eye on those ratios in a normal course of the business, and that alone stops the institutional attitude. And I will also say that you're going to create freedom of incubation and startup culture within larger organization. Carve a team out and don't hold them to the same standards and treat them like a startup. And that is oftentimes the secret sauce to really accelerate and innovate, but maintain a standard on processes and culture which is needed to deliver a certain quality which our clients would expect.
Well, I mean, when you think about that word inspiration, oftentimes we talk about it, and I don't know if people really think about what's the root of the word. Where does inspiration come from? Canadians, we can all remember My Big Fat Greek Wedding, a great Canadian movie, and the father shared with us everything comes from the Greek. Some words come from the Latin, though, and if you think about going over to the hospital and checking your respiration rate, we're really checking your breathing. So I guess, Marc, this question to you now, how are you at Dell breathing life into people rather than sucking the energy out of them like a dead Duracell battery?
Why is my question so much more aggressive than their version of the question? I don't understand.
I knew you could handle it. Go for it.
Look, the first thing that comes to mind when I think about that is it's this diversity word, right? Diversity. So we live in an ever-changing world, right? Things are being iterated and changing and evolving, constantly evolving, right? Constant evolution. And what you need to drive or to keep up with that evolution is creativity. And what better way to instill creativity or a culture of creativity within your organization than to get a diverse canvas of ideas, right? And this is where this word diversity comes in for me. Now, there's the obvious version of what that word means, right? There's race, there's color, right? Gender, sexual orientation. There's a bunch of different obvious things that touch on diversity, but really what I'm talking about is creativity and diversity of thought, right? Holger and I don't know each other. He may be German, I may be of Haitian descent. We may discover that we are much more alike than perhaps Carolyn and I are. So I think it's finding folks, building a culture where people's new and fresh ideas, back to your point about a safe environment, right? There's a platform to be able to share those new and creative ideas.
So is there a
Can I have one comment, Belle? The other thing I would say about like this whole notion of creativity and innovation, I would ask the audience, like, how many of you have a reverse mentor, meaning a young person who's mentoring you? Again, these lights are problematic. I don't see any hands. Or how many of you have a youth council that's actually advising your business? And again, another innovative idea where we can actually, and we have this at Plan, I have a council of young people that advise me on where the future is going, on what is important to them, on how they want to see the world look like in 20 or 30 years. If you need some inspiration or some ideas to really push the edge, bring some young people in and have a conversation with them. I would say it's one of the best ways to really figure out where the future can go. These are your customers, your stakeholders of tomorrow. Invite them in today.
So Carolyn, we can learn from our kids, is that what you're saying? Really? Wow.
And so if you could give us just sort of, as the leaders that are in the room today, just one little tiny tip. So for me, if I will, I think about how often I see managers, and I'll use that term as sort of a derogatory, because I don't believe we can manage people. People manage themselves. We can manage a budget, we can manage a project, we can manage a schedule, but people will lead themselves against shared expectations, especially when we're abundantly clear. What I also see, though, is that too often managers talk too much. And they'll share an idea, and then their team will just shut up and just go and do that, or let's get back to our desk so we can do what we thought we were supposed to be here to do. So as a leader, how do you get people to offer their suggestions? You talked about listening, you talked about innovation, but how do you draw it out of your people?
Well, it's surround yourself with people which are not afraid to speak their mind. I mean, that is a key function of leadership, that you surround yourself with people which are not shy to give you feedback on the spot. And I can tell you that that is one of the dangers when you're a leader, that oftentimes people tell you what you want to hear, or they tell you what you think you want to hear. And I can tell you, we had to bring your kids to school day last week, and I did bring my daughter. She's a grade 9, and she did deliver me some feedback. I did the opening greeting. I spoke too loud. I was annoying, and. So she's not afraid to tell me that, and nobody else in the room did that. So, but obviously she's not a good example. But I have people on the team which have no hesitation to tell me what they think, and obviously it needs to be in a professional context. But I would encourage everybody to surround yourself with people which are not shy, and that is the best reflection to keep yourself in check.
Excellent. Any other points, any other ideas?
Yeah, actually, Carolyn, I want to build on your point around creating a safe environment. I think that part of that is the very first interaction that you have with any new hire, right, or any new person joining your team, right? I'm a big fan in that first initial meeting to make it abundantly clear that I'm not on a power trip, right? That this is not about sort of the employee being accountable to me. And besides, my name is not on the building, it's Michael Dell's, right? So no delusions of grandeur there. But as we often like to put it within our team is, our roles as leaders is really to hold people accountable to themselves, right? We like to remind people that they are not accountable to us. You are not accountable to me. You are accountable to your own goals, right? To your own objectives, and that of the customer and that of the organization, right? So leadership is really just a matter of making sure that your actions are congruent with the things that you say that you're going to do, and congruent with your goals. That has nothing to do with me.
Well, I don't see leadership quite like that. I don't hold leadership as a trait of holding people accountable. I think it's quite the opposite. I think it is rather empowering and enabling and making sure that people which follow you and try to do the right thing for the company are empowered to do that. And certainly accountability is part of it, but in the central part of leadership, in my view, is to chart a path which people want to embark on and really enjoy to do that, and accountability is a byproduct of that. So I like to tone down the level of accountability, and in fact, I can give you an example that we, only 3 years ago, we had the typical matrices in our client services where we tried to get people accountable to adhere to a certain call length of 12 minutes, and that was their performance measure, and we removed all of that, and miracles happened. People were accountable by themselves. There were clients which wanted 20 minutes on the call, and others needed 2 minutes. So it is not the role of a leader, in my view, to police that, and the accountability by empowerment, in my view, is a much more powerful one.
What I would add to that is I think, the more senior you go, and especially, when you start leading an organization, everybody wears their shiny shoes when they come to see you. So you have to, and yes, I'm using a shoe analogy, not a sports analogy, some gender equality. Yay to the women in the room. But you have to overcome that somehow. And I think there's some really practical ways to do that. If you're in a meeting with your team, if you're sharing your opinion first and then waiting for them to share their opinion after, you're in trouble. Never share your opinion first. Always facilitate the discussion, because as soon as you open your mouth, that will become sort of the lead opinion. You have to mine for disagreement. So if you're in a meeting and you're seeing that all of your team is agreeing with you, then you have to be able to ask questions to say, okay, so let's say they didn't agree with us. What would they say? And then you'll see people open up, and you have to create that safety for disagreement. But the problem is if you go into the science of human behavior, people don't want to disagree. It's not natural. People want to forge consensus, they want to collaborate. It's not a natural reaction. So you have to actually force some of the disagreement, and then people get more comfortable with it. And I can tell you, the more you disagree as a team, the healthier you are, because you're getting different viewpoints on the table, and you can ultimately strengthen your actions. But it's hard work.
There we go. Well done. Good discussion. My goodness. My work here is about halfway through now with you, just so you know. But what I want to do with the audience is let you know that I'm going to ask a few more questions, but then I'm going to come out to you. So think about what questions would you like to hear these individuals respond to. Jot them down. I'll be out there probably in about 15 minutes or so. All right. So, Holger, another question coming to you here now. Let's see. It's no surprise that leaders are talented, introspective, and experienced professionals in their respective fields. However, they are also really quite busy and at times can get distracted by the day-to-day, similar to other employees. What do you do to take a step back and evaluate your own blind spots and knowledge gaps to really continue your own self-development?
Yeah, it's a great question. The one thing we do at ADP, and just sensing from interviews I have with people which apply for jobs and come with different company backgrounds, and I have not found yet a lot of firms which go quite as deep in terms of giving a leader feedback. So at ADP, when you think about rating, you go on Google and you rate your last experience. You buy something on Amazon, you rate your last experience, and you can go and rate your doctor and rate your teachers, and the world is full of ratings. And but there's not a lot of places where the rating of your leadership and how you perform as a manager really goes as quite as deep that this becomes cadence of your quarterly to-do list. And at ADP we do that. So we empower our employees with tools which really not just allow, but ask and mandate them to rate the leaders. And that is, as you would expect, anonymous, and it calls out your strengths, your weaknesses. You obviously treat people with respect, but also just how do you perform as a leader overall? Are you doing your job as a leader? And then, so it is very obvious, and when you stand out there, with your rating, you're gonna explain yourself. So we do it at ADP in a very systematic way. We give our employees scorecards to score management, and that keeps you pretty grounded. There are things coming out which you thought you had down, and you doing well on those, and then guess what? Your team doesn't think so, and that's really where you need to then dig in deeper. And do you do really enough coaching? Do you do enough in terms of really empowerment and communication? And those are really good self-reflectors. So that's what we do.
There we go. So it's amazing to have hidden talent, but those blind spots.
Yes.
Nobody wants to be Elaine from Seinfeld. Her dancing techniques were not something that. Anyway, Marc, let's talk about that. How has the recent uprising of inclusion movements, you talked about diversity already, but let's talk about inclusion movements like #MeToo, among others, impacted you and your organization's leadership culture?
Okay, very, very important question, and I'm glad you posed it. So first things first, I think a couple of things to mention there. Number one, #MeToo is giving us a platform, right? A platform for dialogue, a platform to bring up some topics that may make folks feel uncomfortable. It's given us a platform to ask some really tough questions, but I think just as importantly, it's given us a platform to be introspective and to, to give some pretty tough answers as well, right? So I think part of it is just having, the opportunity to have an open dialogue so that, people can cover off their blind sides, ask any questions about any situations that may feel a little bit ambiguous, and it's really an opportunity to sort of demystify a topic, okay? So that's part of it, the platform for dialogue. But what I would also offer is that any group that feels underrepresented in the marketplace, whether it be women, black men, people with diverse backgrounds when it comes to their religion, diverse backgrounds when it comes to their sexual orientation. Anybody that feels underrepresented should embrace movements, and in particular, the #MeToo movement. It's a movement that's got a lot of legs, and it's provoking a lot of conversation. And really, if you think about what it's doing for all of us, is it's giving us an opportunity to evolve our behavior so that it mirrors, right? It truly mirrors the current landscape of the job market today, but frankly, the landscape of our society. So I welcome it all.
Well, and it's rather shocking actually right now, Marc, because here in Toronto, many of us have been disturbed by some announcements, and it's not in the workplace, it's in our schools. And so, Caroline, I think you've got a really great opportunity at Plan International. But what role can leaders and executives play in recognizing and addressing the gender norms that too often are holding women back? And when we hold women back, who are holding up half the sky, I think we're holding everyone back.
Yeah, actually, the research shows that societies where, regardless of your gender, you can fully participate are more secure societies, are more prosperous societies, are more healthy societies, are more well-educated societies. I mean, I could keep going on. And yet, even after Me Too, we still haven't made progress. In fact, the conversation has died down a little, and what I would say is the statistics are actually showing that we're worse off. So today, out of the top 100 companies on the TSX, guess how many are run by women? 1. And in fact, there are less women in leadership roles now in some of the top companies than there were 5 years ago. And for some of those women that are stepping down, I would say the research is showing that all of them, if not most of them, are being replaced by men. So we're actually declining in some of the gender equality work that we've made progress on. So I think, what do we have to do with that? Well, we have to realize that there are very deep-seated norms out there and an unconscious bias that actually hold all of us back, including women too, from valuing equality. I was just listening to a speaker this morning. I mean, this was fascinating. They were looking at some statistics, and did you know that companies would rather hire a white male who has been convicted of the crime and faced prison time rather than a black educated woman? yeah, it's bananas. But I mean, this continues to happen. So I would say that we have to recognize that we're not making the progress that we thought we were making. I would say that we have to, as leaders in this room, really challenge ourselves and say, what are our unconscious biases and what do we need to do to actually remove this? And ultimately, we have to make the case to say, where is the future going to take us if we don't address this? We know that we're going to be missing out on talent that's out there that could really revolutionize our businesses. Listen, we've already made the economic case. That doesn't seem to be working either. So we have to start asking ourselves, when are we going to actually do this? And it's not just beneficial for women. It's actually, as I mentioned earlier, beneficial for all of us, including men, including boys. And I'll just end off on a really interesting statistic. Plan International did a survey among Canadian girls 14 to 24. We found that 75% of girls, by the time they're about 18, have already said that their gender holds them back. So listen, if we are kind of waiting for the next generation to move this forward, we have to push more because they are already feeling the gender biases that we hold. So, you know, if not now, when? If not after something like Me Too, when are we going to make progress on this?
It's a good question, and clearly we still don't have the answer yet. So, Holger, what would you suggest are some of the biggest challenges that you're facing right now, and or your people are facing right now as leaders today?
Yeah, that's, you know, moving on from, I guess, the diversity topic, which I agree with, there's still something. I just want to, just to come back a little loop on that one, I wonder what that is, so, right? Why is there so many years and generations have talked through that, and we feel still we haven't moved the needle much, and because it is still, look at the politics and company leadership boards, and it is very much still a white male kind of world, and I'm really wondering that. I don't have the answer either, but it is certainly a true observation. I want to second that. So what the biggest challenge for leadership, I think today is technology. And that's not just saying because it's obviously my passion and that's what we do as a company, but I do believe it's not just a platform you put in front of the client, it's your whole business is technology. You gotta, from every point in the operations, be it the implementation, be it how you run accounting, how you attract clients, which is digital marketing, technology is everywhere. And I think what leadership struggles increasingly with is that a lot of leaders without a technology background are forced to make decisions which are vastly evolving around technology. So I do believe that is a big ticket. You know, technology is so prevalent, and software eats jobs, and intelligence substitutes research tanks, and artificial intelligence, and technology progress, understanding it, knowing where it's disruptive, where is it supplemental, where is it complementary, and how fast to implement it is such a big ticket these days. And we see it in our own kids, how they deal with technology, how they use it, how intuitive that is for them. And my daughter, she's shipping herself frappuccinos to her house through Uber Eats, and it is bonkers. For her, it wouldn't even occur to get the bicycle out, and it is a technology game, right? And so that's something we have to deal with as leaders going forward. Technology is everywhere. It's not the product we sell, it's everywhere, and we're gonna understand it, and we're gonna get our companies digital, and we're gonna do it fast, and we're gonna do it as Canadians more so than our partners in the United States, and that is something we should also, as a society, be worried about. In my view, in Canada, I'm Canadian, by the way, as well, even though I have a German background, but I'm very passionate about it. But there is not enough good. There's good technology competency, but the technology is owned by American firms, and Canada needs to have a stronger leg in it. All software, all social media, everything is American, and I do work for an American software firm, but in the end, it is a backbone to future prosperity, and Canadians, in my view, need to do a little bit more of not just being in the game, but also driving it.
Mm-hmm. So given technology and, you know, looking at that, we know that depending on who is actually Googling, based on the logarithms and the AI that's out there, how do we know that we've got credible data to work with. Any thoughts from the panel? Anyone on the panel?
Credible data in a sense
Not
of...
fake news, yeah.
Oh, well, the fake, I didn't think you would bring up the fake news story. That was not in the script, but yeah.
Next topic, Donald Trump.
That's right, so we're going to move on from that quick. But I would say that it is a key skill to teach the next generation to tell apart quality content from manipulation, from gossip, from fake data, from statistics you can pull from any direction, any set of data you want and you get, and that is certainly a skill to have, the judgmental, the evaluation competence on what is fact and what is rhetoric or supporting rhetoric, and that is an increasingly important skill for young people to have and leaders to have as well.
And frankly, just another example, right, of the benefits of having diverse teams, right? Is having that canvas of different ways of looking at things to perhaps stifle out some of the, fake news, as you put it, or fake information.
I think too, we have to, as leaders, move on from like the soundbite and the tweet. And I mean, at these conferences, we do talk a little bit in sound bites, and you're probably tweeting them out. But I think we have to have then the opportunity with our teams to go deep. And we need to cultivate minds that can not only go across huge amounts of data and input, but they can also go deep as well. What I sometimes see actually from some of the new leaders coming into our organization is everyone's really good at kind of going across. But we're losing the art of actually going deep and being thoughtful and spending time with the problem and trying to make the connections. And I think that is the risk. In fact, we know that the science is saying to us, the more time you spend on your phone and online, our brains are starting to rewire so they can't go deep anymore. And I think as leaders, we have to be really careful, because the challenge is that some of the issues that we're facing will not be solved by us scanning the surface. We've got to sit with the problem and go deeper with them. And if we come up with solutions too fast because we haven't gone deep enough, we're going to be wrong.
So you're just totally bringing Einstein back to my brain again here, because he loosely paraphrased, shared with us that if he had 1 hour to save the world, he'd spend 59 minutes defining the problem. The solution will come in 1 minute. And so how are you problem solving in your organizations now? Is there something unique or special that you're doing? How do you encourage people to go deeper? Because we want instant, fast, solve it.
I mean, we're solving some of the issues that we've dealt with since the beginning of humankind: injustice, poverty, exclusion. These are not easy issues to solve, and the reality is that had they been, we would have solved them by now. And so I think, part of what we also have to struggle with at Plan is that people now are receiving information in sound bites. We're all being inundated with messages. So how do we engage a Canadian to talk to them about why they need to join our organization? Because they just want a quick, 140 characters, tell me why we should support you. And it's not that easy. So I think, one thing is we have to get really good about figuring out that this is actually a journey that we take people on. It's no longer just these quick hits. And we're all kind of almost trained to think about the quick hit, the quick lead with the customer, or the quick solution to this problem. We actually have to look at it as a journey. This, I keep telling my team, this is a marathon, not a sprint. So if that is the case and we look at it like that, let's try something, learn, try something again, learn, try something, learn some more. And it's through building on years and years of learning that we can ultimately come to better solutions. But that doesn't happen fast. And we are trained now, and we know that even the algorithms in Facebook are starting to train us to get quick dopamine hits. And so actually, this is now becoming counterculture, to actually start to go deep with problems and take our time figuring out solutions, because in our digital world, our minds are being rewired to want that quick hit.
Wow. Well, Holger, you mentioned it. We went off script a little bit today. Are you guys ready to see what kind of questions they have for you?
Of course.
I have no control over this in any way, shape, or form, but if you would just raise your hand, I will have a microphone in the audience. I will come to you.
That's the first one that you're actually running there.
If you could define leadership of people and leadership in an industry in one word, what would it be, and how do they intersect?
Well, maybe I can start giving my perspective. I think, leadership comes in a million different flavors, right? So that's something, I think the face value of that we need to accept. I think the face value of there is no one-size-fits-all leadership applied. I can tell you that the diversity of leadership on my team is something I enjoy. There's styles which are 30 years, have been in job, same cadence, discipline, and then there's totally more free-ranging casual styles, and both of them yields the same results. So I think that is an important recognition that leadership has so many different flavors, and you should not try to attempt to shoehorn one set of leadership on everybody's situation.
Yeah, I guess where my brain goes first when I hear that question is perhaps to think about kind of the best leadership advice that I've ever been given. And it was a long time ago. I want to say it was about 25 years ago when I first started my career. And it was a colleague of mine that I'd actually started with at Dell. We started on the same day. And I remember him saying to me, "Marc, the best leaders are predictable." I kind of simmered on that for a while. I wasn't really sure what it meant for me at the time, and I'm not sure that it meant much to me, shortly thereafter. But I have to admit that it's a notion that's kind of stuck with me for the last 20, 25 years, because if you think about it, being predictable likely means that you set pretty good expectations. Being predictable may mean that you foster an environment of transparency. Being predictable probably means that you're fostering an environment of trust. So to this day, when in doubt, when I'm looking for that one word, as you put it, of inspiration, I often think of be predictable. That might be two words, but
no, I think that's true, and I don't disagree with what you're saying. It's just American politics teaches us that that's not necessarily true, and predictability doesn't necessarily translate into good leadership. I would say a lot of people would say he's a great leader, and he's not predictable. So, and he's vastly successful. So it does prove a little bit the point that leadership comes in so many different forms and flavors, and that's the beauty about it. I think that's actually good news for all of us. We can all be successful in leadership in our own ways, and there's not this one-size-fits-all attribute. There's different combinations of it.
I would say it really comes down to, the word for me is unleash. So as a leader, your role is to unleash the potential of your team. It's to unleash the potential of your organization. It's to unleash the solutions that maybe are out there but haven't been scaled, or the solutions that are out there but haven't been found. I truly believe we will find the solution to gender inequality and poverty, and I'm hoping that it'll happen in my lifetime, but I think it just hasn't been unleashed. And so the real job of a leader is to unleash people and potential.
That's great, Carolyn.
Panel straight ahead of you, right ahead. Straight ahead, straight in front. There we go. Hi.
This might be a typical one, but if you could tell your now present self a tip that you would have given your first role in leadership advice, what would that be? So what have you learned over your career that you wish you would have known stepping into a leadership role?
I can tell you that one of the key things leaders need to understand, and leadership in the context of companies, and unless you are the CEO of Facebook or startup entrepreneur, all leaders in most companies are also followers. So I think it is an important thing to recognize leadership is not a status extended to you, you're also following somebody. And so, being a good leader, but you also gonna learn to be a good follower. And if you don't do that, your leadership won't succeed. So I think that is an important, distinction, that leadership also requires in companies to learn how to follow, and that is there's not a lot of discussion around followership, but there's a lot of discussion around leadership. But I think it's equally important to learn to be a good follower, because the odds are you're taking direction from somebody, and even if you're the CEO of a large company, you're reporting to a board, and you're going to follow what they say. So it is just as important trait as the ability to lead itself.
I would say that, and this is a little bit specific maybe to some women leaders in the crowd, but I think as women in particular, we're socialized to have people like us. And the higher you go in leadership, the more people who don't like you. And especially if you're trying to take a stand and do something different, you have to be ready for a certain amount of criticism. If you do things that are out of the ordinary and you're sort of a misfit in terms of your leadership, and I think quite honestly, that's what we need, because some of the issues that we are trying to solve, we've been at for a while, and the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, hoping for different results. So we actually need to lead differently as well. But with doing anything different or anything out of the box, you will get criticism. And you need to be prepared for that. And so I think, going back to my younger self, what would I say is really, you can't listen to that. You cannot listen to the noise. And in fact, you have to almost anticipate it. And I would say that sometimes you can even get to the place where you're doing the right thing if you're getting enough criticism.
That's awesome. I think for me, it would be along the lines of what Caroline has described, but it would be closer to this idea of trusting your instincts. But for similar reasons, Caroline. I mean, when I first became a leader, there weren't a lot of leaders that looked like me, that frankly looked like me, that talked like me, that had the ideas that I put forth. And you go through a period, particularly early in your career, where you believe that the best way to sort of ramp up into a position or into a set of responsibilities is to emulate the people around you. But there's something to be said about listening to your inner voice, listening to those instincts, right? Particularly if you're rooted in a vision and you're rooted in a set of values, to trust those values and to trust that those values and the ideas of the people around you will bring you to your desired state. So I think the best advice that I would have given myself is to trust my instincts.
Panel far right, your right hand side, way over here, way over here.
Hi, Caroline. I actually have a question on one of the ideas you brought up, which was the reverse mentorship, which I think is actually a great concept. But I just wanted to ask if you can elaborate a little bit more on that. I know sometimes it's hard or it may be intimidating to present in front of senior leaders and executives about your ideas. What's the concept, what's the mechanism or process that you use to really make sure you draw out those ideas from these young individuals? And as well as, are these individuals volunteering themselves or are they pre-selected?
So let me answer that question by sharing a quick story. There was a famous Harvard Business Review or Harvard Business professor that was basically, talking to the kind of graduating MBA class, and he said, listen, you are used to being sort of the cream of the crop, and you are going to go out into the world, and you will be the smartest person in the room probably, and you will be treated as such, but the key, the professor said, to really being an incredible leader is always remembering you can always learn something from anyone. In fact, you can learn a lesson from talking to the janitor or the cleaning lady. It doesn't matter what level you're at. I truly, truly believe that, because everybody has something to give us in terms of a lesson. So I think it's the same concept with reverse mentoring. There are insights that young people have that as leaders we can easily lose touch with. So what do I try and do? Well, we have essentially a youth advisory council at Plan. They speak to my board of directors at least once a year. We just had them talking last week to them. They talk to our leadership team. They will oftentimes give us consultations on some of the critical projects we're doing. We're doing a digital transformation right now. Who better than have the young people actually feed into that? And we just ask them to self-select. Put up your hand. If you want to be part of this, come and join us. And the really critical piece is that oftentimes we will have a few that have become leaders, and then we ask the youth to select the next set of leaders. So it's all in their hands. I don't decide who's a leader amongst the youth decide who is a leader amongst the youth. And right now, interestingly enough, we're doing a cross-country consultation. This is sponsored by TD Bank, where we are asking youth across all different cities, towns across Canada to actually come up with an implementation plan to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and gender equality in particular. Because we recognize that if we are going to create and move some of these major challenges that we have to get the up-and-coming leaders to own it and to actually create it.
Panel to the very back of the room, you're going to have to cover your eyes way back here. You got us?
Hi, my question was on process implementation. And when you've decided as a collective that this process is going to be an improvement for the current processes, how do you encourage consistency for the team?
On process improvements, and you know, I'm not sure there is a one-size-fits-all answer to that. I think it depends a little bit on what kind of process we are talking about, but I think the most important is on all of those to set principles that whatever the process is, it's going to be easier and simpler and take complexity out. So if you have a paradigm around process improvement which guides yourself around whatever the end of it is, it's going to be easier for the client or for the employees, ideally for both. I think you're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I think the one I would offer you on that one is just in terms of this idea of failing fast, right? So if you read anything on the Agile Software Development Framework, I think you could take a page off of that framework in terms of what it is that you're talking about. But this idea of implementing ideas as quickly as possible, failing, if appropriate, at those ideas as quickly as possible, having a mechanism whereby you can extract feedback out of the process or those using the process to then use that feedback to then make improvements to the process and find yourself in that continuous loop. I encourage you to look into Agile. It might give you some inspiration.
And so, audience, thank you. Thank you for your questions. And panel, one final question for you as we head away. We've touched on organizational leadership practices and ways in which you're moving your business forward. But for you, personally, what are you most proud of? Marc?
Yeah, I'll gladly start. I'm back to this word diversity. I started at Dell in 1998, so it's been some time. It's been some time. Can't believe I'm that guy in the room saying that now, but it's true. And we were talking about diversity before talking about diversity was even cool, right? And it goes back to the concept that I was offering you earlier. I mean, we're blessed to be in a city like Toronto with a tremendous amount of diversity from all walks of life. And from my very first days at Dell, we would often talk about the value of bringing different and diverse ideas to the forefront to help develop our strategies. So I'm super proud of the fact that I work for an organization that I left, and I came back to largely in part of the culture of the organization that's largely rooted, again, in this term, diversity.
Beautiful. Holger?
Well, I'm proud of, and I learned a little bit, because there's always this, what's most important? The employees, the customers, the stakeholder, your manager, headquarters. There's no confusion at ADP. It's the employees, period. You can't have any of what you want. You can't have good processes, happy clients. You can't have profits in the end if you don't unlock and find a way to activate and engage your employees. And I'm really proud that that is such a philosophy at ADP. And I like to think that I'm fully on board with that culture. And then in regards to diversity, just a keyword, at ADP Canada, 68% of the workforce are women, and 52% of the leaders are female. So I like to think that I was silent on the diversity topic because I don't believe that is necessarily something which we have been sloppy on.
Well done.
I would say that leadership truly can be world changing. And I've seen that at Plan over the last couple of years. We set a target that by this fiscal year, we were going to achieve 4 things. And we said we were going to do this all as a team because we were committed to ultimately changing the world. And not only did we hit those 4, but we exceeded them on all fronts. And this goes back to the fact that really at the end of the day, it was about unleashing the potential of folks within the organization. When I became CEO, there was so much potential, but it wasn't being unleashed. So this year, our goal was to reach 3.7 million children. We reached over 6 million. We were going to raise 230 million from Canadians. We did 236. We were going to engage 1 million Canadians. We engaged 1.3, and we were going to do this with no more than 20% overhead, and our overhead was the lowest at 18.7%. So this truly is a study in the art of leadership, and I would say if ever you doubt that leadership can be truly transformational and can change the world, I would say just make sure that thought is completely ingrained in you, because truly the fact that you've invested in this conference means that you believe that, and the results can show it. You can literally change the world by improving your leadership.
And there you have it, your executive panel. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming down.